All right. Well, I am Dr. Cherie Chevelle, the president of Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers. And I, along with all of our executive team, would like to say hello to all of you and welcome all of you here. I'm actually going to turn our meeting over to our past engagement and membership chair, Trania Cooper, who is going to be our host for today. And later on, we will give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have. So Trania Cooper, you have the virtual floor.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Glad to see you guys on this cold morning. It's a great day to kind of learn about some Black history and social work this morning. So thank you for coming. I am going to introduce our presenter and our new membership engagement member of the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers, Mr. Tony Austin. He is from Mobile, Alabama. He hails from Mobile, Alabama. He has a master's of social work from Our Lady of the Lake, I believe in San Antonio is where the school's located. And then he is currently working for Community in Schools. So as I virtually pass the torch to my brother, he has been a member of our organization since September. And so we welcome him with open arms, and I'm passing it to you, Tony. You guys enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Ms. Cooper. Thank you very much. And good morning to you all. Appreciate you all being able to join us today, especially for some of you who are in different time zones and you probably woke up a little earlier than expected, but nonetheless, thank you for being here on this blessed morning. Yes, just as Ms. Cooper was saying, I got my MSW from Our Lady of the Lake in San Antonio, but I'm also a proud HBCU grad. I got my BSW from PVAMU, located in Prairie View, Texas. Now, the presentation today, of course, is titled Black History and Social Work, with us still being in the month of February, but like my sister Latanya, who is, joining us today, like she told me at the beginning of the month, hey, it's Black History every day because we're Black every day, all right? So definitely, I concur with her on that. Now, this presentation is gonna be on PowerPoint, and right now, my wife is actually gonna help me pull this up so everyone can be able to see the screen. So just bear with me for 1 second, we'll get this started.
No problem, we got you. We got you. So excited about this.
Okay.
All right.
All right, can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yes, bro.
Okay, all right. Okay, Black History and Social Work, presented to you by the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers. And again, I'm Tony Austin, or TA as most people refer to me. Now, when we're talking about Black history, I have to give credit where credit is due. And that's to Mr. or Brother Carter G. Woodson, who was one of the great researchers of his time, a gentleman who always had a love and affection for learning more and more about his own people, which thus led him to create what was known then as Black History Week. However, over time, and since 1976, every US president has acknowledged February being Black History Month. However, 6 years prior to, in 1970, the Black students and educators at Kent State University lobbied and advocated for it to be for an entire month. So I have to make sure that, that is said as well as to how we got to where we are today. So again, kudos to Brother Woodson. Now today, just to go over an outline, I'll give a brief introduction on what the presentation is actually going to be about. Then we're going to talk about the social worker characteristics, the first Black social workers, prominent Blacks in social welfare, prominent Blacks in mental health, prominent Blacks in social justice, and prominent Blacks in sports and entertainment social work. Now I'm also gonna, break up the monotony where we, have like a little trivia session or whatever, just to, kind of get everybody involved and not just be me showing you all slides or whatever. But again, we definitely want to make an interaction at the end. We're gonna have a closing discussion where we will allow everyone to, give their comments, etc., in addition to whatever, information you may have as well. But first and foremost, the introduction. Just like Ms. Cooper said, yes, I'm from Mobile. I spent the first 12 and a half years of my life in Mobile until my family, by way of military, moved to the Central Texas area. So I've been there ever since. But the fact that I spent my childhood and I guess pre-adolescent years in Mobile, I got exposed to civil rights history at a young age. I still remember when I think I was in 3rd grade, our teacher during Black History Month, she showed us like the first civil rights documentary I had ever seen. And ever since then, I've had a love for just learning about Black people and, the struggle that, we've been through. But also my late godmother, Oma Clark, she used to march with Dr. King during the 1950s and 60s. And so she would let me listen to some of her old audio tapes, like when they would be in some of their meetings and things of that nature. And I tell you, it was an interesting experience nonetheless. But again, like I said, I've always had just a thirst for wanting to learn more and more about our history as people. Now, today, as far as social work characteristics goes, historically, we know that social work has been very female dominated in terms of numbers. Although lately it has grown with more and more of us males that are involved. I still remember even growing up watching in the 1980s, watching shows like Different Strokes, Punky Brewster. When they would have a social worker, it was always a lady, okay? Or if it was another, sitcom or TV show, it was always a lady. So even growing up, I thought that only females were social workers. But of course, we know that, again, that it's, female dominated, but we do have our share of males. Now, over the years, though, there have been tons of Black people with degrees and without degrees that have played an integral role in the struggle, per se, okay, whether it be the civil rights movement, Reconstruction, etc. But again, today, I wanted to focus more so on those who basically have done social work in their deeds, per se, in addition to those, who are famous that also have the social work degrees. Now, this presentation, again, like I said, will focus more on deeds and also the traditional social worker roles, that we learned early on about the advocate, the facilitator, the case manager, the organizer, the educator, all those illustrious words. So again, that's the way I wanted to frame this presentation. All right. Now, first and foremost, Sister Ida B. Wells, my favorite sister when learning about Black history, okay? America's first Black social worker. Sister Wells was, as in her social work roles per se, was an advocate, educator, organizer, facilitator, and manager. She was born into slavery, the last few years of slavery, and once the Civil War ended, and of course, all those who were enslaved were emancipated, Miss Wells and her family continued to live in Mississippi. At an early age, she developed a love for learning. So she decided to attend college at the age of 16 at nearby what's known as Rusk College, an HBCU, by the way, and also became a teacher starting out. Unfortunately, her parents passed away due to yellow fever during that particular plague or pandemic, and she became the caregiver of her younger siblings. So again, she's learning how to manage and multitask and do all those things that social workers know how to do. However, she wanted to relocate and thus ended up becoming an investigative journalist who ended up writing and publishing articles about lynchings throughout the South. As far as where she gets credit for, I guess, being the first Black social worker was when she ended up joining the women's suffrage movement, in addition to all the work that she had done before. But again, Ms. Wells was someone who was definitely fearless, did not care, and also promoted the freedom to be able to use firearms. She promoted that because of the fact that so many Blacks were being lynched throughout the South, and she encouraged every Black family to at least have one gun in their household to defend themselves from would-be lynchers. So I thought it was kind of ironic that the NRA would conveniently, talk about her, but they left that part out, that she did that for Blacks to be able to defend themselves from angry white mobs, etc. So again, she joined the women's suffrage movement. But even through her works and efforts and being an advocate for Black people and being someone who was pretty much, I guess, of the anti-lynching movement, she was able to use her organizational skills and her management skills, and actually was able to create various social work, social service type of organizations, such as the NAACP. She was one of the 9 founders of that. But Sister Wells is often credited as our first Black social worker once social work became a particular career per se. Next up, Brother George Edmund Haynes. Brother George Edmund Haynes, he was America's first Black male social worker. Brother Haynes, in his role, he was pretty much an advocate, of course, an educator, an organizer, a facilitator, and a manager. Brother Haynes was more so known for his role as an educator and a researcher, but he received more notoriety because he was the co-founder of the National Urban League. The National Urban League was basically founded as an organization to further help the causes of the Black communities, the poor Black communities especially. But Mr. Haynes, or Dr. Haynes per se, is credited as our first Black male social worker. Now, another sister who was a part of the struggle early on, and was probably the second social worker, even before Brother Haynes, was Sister Mary Church Terrell. Now, Sister Terrell was one of the first Black women to actually earn a college degree. And also she became known as an activist, being an advocate, an educator, and an organizer. She traveled throughout Europe after her college graduation and became quadlingual, meaning she had it down packed as far as being able to speak 4 different languages. Once she traveled back to the US, however, she decided to educate college students at Wilberforce University and various other universities out there, because she wanted to make sure that more and more Black students were educated about the various different languages, just to help them to be able to become fluent in more than one language. She joined the women's suffrage movement. And one thing about Sister Terrell was that, along with Ida B. Wells, they decided to protest because the marches that these women had, they were not integrated. And so these sisters, they were like, hey, if you're going to ask us to be a part of this movement, a part of this feminist movement, et cetera, you're going to have to include us too, because we're still women when it's all said and done. So all of those things that I've heard about, the Susan B. Anthony's and all that, hey, like I said, these sisters, they kept it genuine the entire time. Okay, so again, I think that they're unsung heroes in our community because they don't get as much credit as they deserve. So once Sister Terrell was able to be a part of the women's suffrage movement and get it integrated, she also was along with Ida B. Wells, was one of the 9 founders of the NAACP, and she also founded the Colored Women's League of Washington, D.C., which is where she spent the majority of her career. All right, next up, Sister Dorothy Heights. Sister Dorothy Heights. Sister Heights, one of our prominent social workers of the 20th century. She was an advocate, a facilitator, and an organizer. Now, Sister Height, her primary concentrations were involving Black women, issues involving Black women, such as illiteracy, unemployment, and voter awareness. She was the chief operator behind the scenes in making sure that the March on Washington was a success. So of course, yes, we saw Dr. King and the other people that were giving their speeches or involved, but it was Sister Height that made sure that the March on Washington was going to be smooth and copacetic as can be. So again, I like to tip my hat off to Sister Dorothy Height because she definitely put in her work and was still an unsung hero. And then she ended up helping to reform. Of course, you know, in today's society, we have a lot of the back and forths about, women's rights. And she helped form an African-American an organization for African-American women for reproductive freedom in support of Jane Roe in the Roe versus Wade case. And lastly, as far as our earlier, social workers, some of our earlier social workers, we have Brother E. Franklin Frazier. Brother E. Franklin Frazier was an intellect, an author, and a researcher. He was an educator, an organizer. He helped establish the Atlanta School of Social Work, which was the first school for Blacks in social work. The Atlanta School for Social Work is now known as Clark Atlanta University. So Brother E. Franklin Frazier, again, his thing was more so with sociology, because again, he was such a staunch researcher, but nonetheless, he ended up in the field of social work. And I guess it wasn't until like the late 1980s when I think the NASW started actually giving him his kudos for being a pioneer in the social work field. And again, like I said, he took pride in researching the dynamics of the Black community. Now we're going to transition to prominent Blacks in social welfare. Prominent Blacks in social welfare. My favorite individual in Black history is that of Marcus Garvey. My favorite Black history icon. Marcus Garvey, I would say, was an advocator, facilitator, educator, and manager. Mr. Garvey was not from the United States, of course. He was Jamaican. So again, I'm a huge advocate of the African diaspora. However, I do like some of the things that I hear Brother Tariq talking about with FBA, Foundation of Black Americans, and even Sister Yvette when they talk about American descendants of slaves. I like all those things. I like what they've been presenting as of lately. However, like I said, I've always been more of a fan of the African diaspora. So that's where Brother Garvey comes in. He was a Pan-Africanist, which again ties into being a proponent of the diaspora. He was the founder of the United Negro Improvement Association. And he was all about uplifting the Black community. I mean, he loved his people. He loved his people. He wanted to see his people do better. One of the things was that I guess helped him to stand out was before he even got to America, he was conversing through written letters with the great Booker T. Washington, because he wanted to establish an HBCU in Jamaica that kind of followed the land grant or the Tuskegee Institute model. Unfortunately, however, once Brother Garvey made it to the US, after he got off the ship, back, of course, it wasn't too many people flying at that time. So once he got off the ship, unfortunately, he had found out that Brother Washington had already passed away. So unfortunately, with that being said, he had no one else to give him the blueprint of how to establish an HBCU in Jamaica that followed the land grant model. But needless to say, much respect to Brother Karenga, who founded Kwanzaa, but Brother Garvey was teaching those concepts long before Kwanzaa, or the idea of Kwanzaa, was created. Things like unity amongst ourselves as people, defining ourselves. I mean, we name ourselves. We're the only people who know how we are, per se, defining ourselves, working together. And my favorite principle, cooperative economics. That means we spend our money with other Black businesses. Anytime I see other brothers and sisters in social work that that are publishing books or are doing something that requires them to receive some type of funding, hey, I love supporting those things, and even things in my own community in general. I love cooperative economics because we help bring each other up as a people from the business and commerce standpoint, and then also doing things with purpose, being creative, and then again faith. But that's the thing that impressed me more so about Brother Garvey. Now, as we continue to talk about social welfare, and we're talking about indeeds per se, I have to give credit also to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad, of course, was the leader of the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad, in his role, was pretty much an advocate, a facilitator, an organizer, an educator, and a manager. The thing that helped them to stand out was that they often appealed to people in the streets and the prisons. They cleaned up many drug addicts and alcoholics in the process. And then they taught the importance of building and maintaining businesses in the community, as opposed to looking for grants and things of that nature from like the federal government. Mr. Muhammad, his whole idea was, hey, let's use what we have. Let's build our own farms. Let's build our own businesses, okay? Let's not depend on others. We need to be an independent nation. So that's one of the things that often intrigued me about, and that's of course, following on the lines of cooperative economics as well. But that's one of the things also that intrigued me about, Mr. Muhammad's approach to things. And of course, he also, being a part of Islam, he, wasn't educated with his religion per se. But also, I think he gets a bad rap for, quote unquote, being a leader of a violent organization. I think he got a bad rap. What he taught was stressing the importance of self-defense in the Black community, meaning that the same things that many of our mothers taught us at a young age, our mothers and our fathers, hey, you defend yourself if someone's trying to hurt you. Well, that's what he talked about. But of course, when the mainstream media gets a hold of that information, they turn it in, oh, he's teaching violence. No, that wasn't it at all. Okay. So again, he stressed the importance of that. And the Fruit of Islam, the security organization within the Nation of Islam, has been an organization that has provided security for many different organizations in the Black community, not just the Nation of Islam. So again, he stressed the importance of self-defense. And also he promoted the art of public speaking. So anytime that you would hear someone who's an avid, member of the Nation of Islam, a lot of times they're good orators. They have outstanding vocabularies. You might have to use a dictionary just to be able to listen to some of the things that they're saying, okay? And they can prattle all day and all night, okay, talking about the things that they believe in. But he talked about the art of public speaking, being able to not only effectively speak, but being able to clarify your points as well too. So that's what I wanted to touch on about Mr. Muhammad. Now, when I talk about the Nation of Islam, I'm going to fast forward, since I'm kind of going in a chronological order per se, but I'm going to kind of fast forward because the Nation of Islam had an offshoot organization known as the 5 Percenters. Okay, well, I should say they're an offshoot of the Nation of Islam. Now, growing up in the 1980s and listening to hip hop and having a stepfather at the time who's a preacher, and my mom, growing up in a Christian household, my mom, she wanted me to listen. She preferred, I should say, that I listen to MC Hammer, because he had a song called "Pray." We got to pray just to make it today. She didn't like me listening to the other, rappers. But one thing I learned about the 5 Percenters in their lyrics, they were always teaching me and other listeners about Black history per se. They were outstanding in being able to display and convey mathematics and science. They could break it down really well. But I love listening to the people who were either of the 5% movement or who kind of listened to some of the 5% teachings per se, like the Big Daddy Kanes, the KRS-Ones, the X-Clans, okay, Nas, Wu-Tang Clan. Those type of hip hop artists were were the ones that I listened to when I was growing up, because again, they often talked about things that was affecting the Black community. So that's I kind of fast forward a little bit, but you know, I kind of had to tie that in since we just got through talking about Mr. Muhammad. And like I said, they're phenomenal in teaching the math and sciences. Now, lastly, as far as social welfare goes, I got to give this sister, Marion Edelman Wright, got to give her kudos. Sister Wright was a champion for children's rights. I still remember that song when I was in elementary school that Whitney Houston sang, "I believe the children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way." Well, that's pretty much the ideology that Sister Wright had, or Sister Wright Edelman had, I should say. She was an advocate for disadvantaged Americans for her entire life. She's still alive and well, and I definitely I am appreciative to the countless amounts of work that she put into the community. Like I said, she's the founder and the president of the Children's Defense Fund. And she was such a big timer that she influenced the likes of people like Dr. King and also Hillary Clinton in her lifespan during the civil rights struggle. She also had some broker qualities too, because she was able, she moved to DC, and that's, you know, probably how she stayed connected to being able to get many things accomplished. So ever since she's been in the DC area, she's never left. And I'm thankful to Ms. Edelman Wright. All right, now, just to kind of break the ice a little bit, I asked that you all feel free to name some of the other prominent Black organizations as it relates to social welfare. So please feel free to unmute yourself and speak up so everyone can hear you. Since we just named some of the organizations that were pretty prominent as far as social welfare, feel free to name some.
I would say Huey P. Newton and the Black Panther Party.
All right, right on. Okay.
Provided breakfast for kids.
All right.
Also
yes,
taught self-defense in Oakland, California.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Self-defense. And again, they didn't teach violence. They taught self-defense. Okay?
Self-defense.
And you're a Cali person as well, correct? A Bay Area person, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Southern California, but raised in the Bay. So
right.
but Texas, Waco's home. Yeah.
All right. Any others? Trust me, I know there are other organizations out there. Again, just wanted to break the monotony, give us a chance to interact on that level. Please feel free to speak up. If not.
Tony, you have killed this. It's so awesome. I feel like everything that I would have thought about, you didn't already put it out there. And then the sister from Cali, like me, came through with BPP. I don't have nothing else to say.
Yes. Thank you, sister. Thank you, sister. Yeah, Sister Latanya, that's my sister from another mister. Okay, so yeah, she's definitely out there doing it. Okay, and definitely a proponent of our community as a social worker. All right. If no other comments, then we'll move right along. Okay, we're gonna talk about prominent Blacks in mental health. Now we know in this day and age, mental health is a huge topic and concern in the Black community. And with that being said, I'm gonna talk about some aspects to consider. First and foremost, Malcolm X's childhood family tragedy. Some years ago, I finally read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was written by himself in cooperation with Alex Haley, the late Alex Haley. And I recently listened to the audible version of it, or the audio version of it. And when I think about this as it relates to mental health, was that how we've just, us as Black people, we just, in these United States of America, how we just have gotten a raw deal on so many levels. And when I think about and listening to the audio version of how his father was was maimed and murdered by, of course, white supremacists. And then his mother couldn't even get insurance because the local people, the people who were local per se, they made up some kind of lie that he rammed himself in the head and then laid himself on some railroad tracks, okay, to be killed on these trolley tracks. Of course, naturally, his mother, Mrs. Little, would naturally have a nervous breakdown, going through that type of tragedy. And then, having people lie to you. See, back then, we didn't have as many licensed clinicians and licensed therapists that could have advocated on family, or Black social workers per se, that could have advocated on the family. See, all they saw was white people who didn't care about their struggle or what they were going through, or who further covered up the crime of his father being murdered. So yes, his mother, naturally, she had a mental breakdown. And instead of them just trying to find her help, they just, placed her in a mental institution pretty much for the remainder of her life. And of course, Malcolm, as a child, reacting to his father's murder was, became very deviant in his own way. And all he and his brothers and sisters, all he and his siblings, I should say, were parceled out into different families, throughout various communities or whatever. But I say all that to say that, again, that's just one of the things that we have, that's one of the many things that we have gone through as a people in our community, to just kind of either be swept under the rug, and it pretty much, it's gonna pretty much automatically be taxing on your mental health in saying that. But then we have the Jim Crow laws. The Jim Crow laws, in my opinion, affected our people mentally as well. The whole thing about being docile to anyone who was white, getting off the sidewalk when they're walking by you, not looking them in the eye when they're speaking. All those things have affected us as a people. And I still hear certain people that talk with that type of, man, they talk with that type of attitude that you should never question someone who's white. They don't say it in those words. But again, it's sad that mentality still exists. But again, the Jim Crow laws, me personally, I feel, had a heavy burden as far as the mental health of our community. And lastly, in regards to that, about 20 years ago, I went to visit my grandmother back home in Alabama. And as we were talking, I mean, just hearing this part as it relates to Jim Crow, I mean, it just kind of made me feel like really weak. But my grandmother, who grew up in the 1930s, was telling me that once she became a full-grown woman in the 1940s, 1950s, how she had to still say sir and ma'am to a 3-year-old white child. I mean, that really like affected me, just hearing that. And or else, she could be punished if she chose not to, especially with her being a homemaker back in the day. So again, we've had so many things, and and we've just been told in so many words indirectly that we should just get over those things. Nah, you can't get over that. Those things still affect you. I mean, just hearing that from my grandmother, that affected me. Just hearing the fact that she had to go through that. So it's no wonder that when I spent much of my preschool and early elementary school years at my grandmother's house a lot. So it was no wonder when I'm at her house and she's watching her stories or The Price is Right, whichever one of those game shows she liked to watch, and during the commercial, when those Maybelline or CoverGirl commercials and they show the white models, and she see me smiling, and she would like get on me like, hey boy, you better watch yourself, hey, you straighten up, that ain't for you, okay? And I didn't recognize at the time that what she was trying to tell me was, hey, when I was growing up, that was synonymous with being lynched, okay? So, you watch yourself, little boy, okay? Stop, get your eyes straight, whatever type of language she would use to me. But again, all those things were pretty taxing on the mental health of the Black community as it relates to the Jim Crow era. And of course, with slavery always, being a factor. But with that being said, we had some of our big timers that fought against that as far as mental health. Sister Frances Cress Wilson, all right, an advocate, an educator, a facilitator, and a case manager, all right. Sister Cress Wilson, she was unapologetically Black, okay? She wasn't gonna apologize to anyone for her stance. She wrote and spoke about how white supremacy and racism affected the mental health amongst Black people, all right? And she didn't mind challenging anyone, whether it be on TV or the radio, who was considered a quote unquote expert at being able to speak against the things that she was saying. And she constantly enlightened the Black community about chemical and biological warfare, systemic, excuse the typo, systemic, and the systemic effort to depopulate the Black community. So Sister Wilson, yes, she was a big time, psychiatrist, but was definitely a proponent of pretty much almost everything Black, all right, as it relates to the psyche of Black people. But again, we definitely appreciate Sister Wilson, who's now an ancestor. All right, the combo, the husband and wife combo, Dr. Kenneth and Dr. Mamie Clark. They were advocates, case managers, educators, facilitators, managers. All right. They conducted the coloring test. And also they conducted and administered the doll experiment, okay? When people often revert to how they show like the little girls or the little Black children, the doll experiment or the cartoon characters, etc. Well, Dr. and Mrs. Clark, Dr. and Dr. Clark, they both, were the ones that were known for creating it. And what they basically were letting us know as Blacks was that how we develop a low sense of self-esteem that starts at a young age. Because again, those things that once most parents or most adults, most Black adults in those times, what they failed to do was that they failed to unlearn the things that they were learning during Jim Crow South or the effects from slavery. They failed to unlearn it, so they naturally taught that to their own children. So their children, pretty much did not think Black was beautiful or did not think Black was good per se. So again, Dr. Kenneth and Dr. Mamie Clark, I definitely tip my hat off to them by keeping us as a community well informed on how we can, destroy ourselves mentally from a young age by thinking that, everyone else is better than us, okay? Or we're not worthy of, being able to, accomplish the things that, we like to accomplish in life, especially if no one like us had done it before. Now, as it relates to social justice, we're moving on to social justice. We're talking about the March on Washington per se. We're transitioning to social justice and prominent Blacks who were involved in that. Okay, when we talk about the March on Washington, we talk about the Big Six. Like I said before, there were sisters of the movement, like Sister Dorothy Heights, also Sister Ella Baker. They were big timers in the movement, but unfortunately, I think we were still living in the times, well, not I think, but we still living in times where the men just had to be out front, okay? Unfortunately, all right? But again, like I said, we talk about the Big Six in that regard. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Big Six were the 6 individuals who were given the credit of the March on Washington or whatever, or as far as being the spearheads. But again, like I said, I gotta give those sisters their props because without them, the March on Washington would not have been a success at all. James Farmer, John Lewis, the late John Lewis, A. Philip Randolph, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young. All right. Of the Big Six, they're all ancestors now, but of the Big Six, of course, Dr. King is probably the most prominent, well, not probably, but he's the most prominent of them all, and most people may see him as the most prominent as it relates to, Black history. But one thing about Dr. King that I was going to say that a lot of people, they fail to realize, or again, when people are convenient in terms of talking about the things that he was preaching and teaching, But one thing that they failed to leave out was that Dr. King was also talking about reparations for the Black community. He talked about, us coming to collect our check. And unfortunately, anytime, just going back to Marcus Garvey, one thing that I didn't mention was that the federal government ended up exiling him and he had to, go back to Jamaica, etc. But every time, man, it seems like, we're doing good. There's always a setback, there's always a setback, whether the federal government gets involved, in it or whatever. But honestly, had that Poor People's Campaign been carried out like it was supposed to be, with Dr. King leading it, I really think us as Black people would have gotten our reparations. Okay, but unfortunately, they assassinated Dr. King, or Dr. King was assassinated, and there pretty much wasn't the leader of that same type of charisma to carry on the movement in the way that Dr. King did it. Okay, yes, we had other leaders in the community, and some people, they had their own premonition about following that person, or they had their own predilection about following that person. But again, when they killed Dr. King, man, that just really just destroyed like so much, that we had really, the momentum that we had going for us. All right. So again, I like to make mention of that. But with that being said, of the big six, the social worker that I'm going to talk about next is that of Whitney Young. Whitney Young actually had an MSW. He attended Kentucky State University for undergrad and HBCU and got his received his MSW from University of Minnesota. But Whitney Young was considered the quote unquote master broker. What that means is, aside from the social work roles he was able to play, an advocate, the broker, the facilitator, organizer, and manager, was that Whitney Young could what you call code switch per se, meaning he could speak the language that white people like to hear per se, okay? And he can come back to the Black community and talk the same things that we were talking about, all right? But he was very pragmatic in his role of being a broker, all right? He was able, again, to have sit downs with important decision makers. As we know, the broker is the person that can go out and get the resources. Mm-hmm. So he was able to have sit downs with important decision makers, including presidents of the United States. And he was also the leader of the president of the National Urban League at the time, when he was at his peak per se. But his efforts and his influence helped create programs such as Job Corps, okay, Medicare, Model Cities, and Head Start. I'm actually a recipient or an alum of Head Start. I was in Head Start as a preschooler per se. All right, but again, we have Brother Whitney Young to thank, for that. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, as we talk about being a broker per se, as in that role in social work. Forgive me, I'm so excited about talking about this, so forgive me for tripping over some words, but again, he's seen as the master broker. But of course, we can't forget about our sisters now, because before Whitney Young, there was this bad sister named Mary McLeod Bethune in terms of being a broker, okay? Having broker qualities. She was an advocate, an organizer, a facilitator, and a manager. She would often confer in her broker qualities with her good friend, Eleanor Roosevelt, who's the First Lady of the United States, about issues regarding the Black community, and thus, being able to get various resources or different laws passed, okay? Since Mrs. Roosevelt, of course, would confer with her husband, who would, sign things into law per se. But again, she used that. She ran a mission school, so she was educated from the start. She was educated at was known as Barbara Scotia, an HBCU in, I think, it's in the Carolinas, but I want to say North Carolina, but I could be wrong. But anyway, she ran a mission school, and then she reached her goal of establishing a Christian-based school for girls, which eventually combined with the all-male school and what we know today as Bethune-Cookman University, okay? All right, but she used her connection, again, being a broker, being a big-time broker, was that she knew John Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller, who at the time was the world's wealthiest person. She used her connection with him to be able to get a donation to be able to establish, you know, the school what we know today as Bethune-Cookman University. All right, so again, I definitely like to pay homage to those particular brokers in social work, historic brokers. All right, now with that being said, I want y'all to see if y'all can name all the HBCUs with an MSW program. Without peeking now, without peeking. Name all the HBCUs with that, or they have an MSW program. You don't have, if you only know one, that's fine. You know, just throw the names out there.
Clark Atlanta University from Whitney M. Young.
All right, all right.
We're from where I graduated from.
Okay.
And got my MSW.
All right.
Also,
knows?
Savannah State has a
Savannah
MSW
Yes, ma'am.
MSW program, and
He has one.
I'm sorry. Say it again.
You.
I said it one more time.
LSU.
LSU, you say?
Yes.
Well, LSU's not an HBCU.
Oh, it's not counted as one? That's where Miss Bryant went. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. LSU is not, but you're close though. You're close in terms of geography per se. All right. So
also Howard University has one, which
Howard
is
University,
phenomenal. I'm
that's
so
correct.
excited about that.
that's correct. Yes,
Mhm.
ma'am. Howard University does.
Prairie
All right.
View A&M University has one now.
Who does?
Prairie View A&M University.
That's right.
Awesome.
That's right. And that's the eloquent and effervescent Dr. Beverly Spears, who's a professor at Prairie View University in the social work department. So yes, they do. They now have an MSW program. All right. All right. Okay. We got some others. Okay. Others.
What about Fayetteville?
Fayetteville State. You are correct, ma'am. They do. Yes, ma'am.
Norfolk State.
Yes, ma'am. They do. Norfolk State. You are correct.
Alabama A&M,
Alabama A&M. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jackson State,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Jackson State, JSU.
I believe North Carolina A&T has one.
Yes, ma'am. North Carolina A&T does.
Morgan State,
Morgan State. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Y'all hitting it. Y'all hitting it good. All right. Okay. So if that's all, then I'll go ahead and name the others. Okay. We have Southern University, okay, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. All right. We have FAMU in Florida. Okay. We have Tennessee State in Nashville, Tennessee. All right. We have Mississippi Valley. Okay. It'd have been in Mississippi. We have Virginia Union. I think theirs is still fairly new, like Prairie View. We have Delaware State, has an MSW program as well. North Carolina Central has an MSW program. South Carolina State has an MSW program. And West Virginia State. All right. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for bringing up that information and being able to provide those answers.
Mr.
All right.
Tony, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Austin. So I'm not a social worker, so I don't know about that those programs, but I did want to, first of all, thank you so much for all the information that you're sharing. This is amazing. When you were talking about the Clarks, Dr. Clarks, and you were talking about more of the psychological aspect and how your grandmother was trying to protect you physically from harm, right? And looking at a white woman. And I just wanted to interject or just share my battle now as a parent, especially of my boys. It's more of a psychological battle instead of a physical one, where it's not necessarily worried about physical danger, but the harm that social media causes for our mental health and how we see ourselves. So that's one of the biggest battles. And then where you were talking about Martin Luther King, you know, like how we don't have a leader anymore. And I think one of the biggest downfalls for us is that we're always looking for a leader. And excuse me, but I will blame the church heavily in that, because we look to a leader to lead us. And I think what we need to do is get into a practice of leading in our personal lives, not looking to have somebody tell us that we are good people, you know, that we deserve goodness, that we deserve to have ownership and all the great things that these different people that you've mentioned have tried to push. Because I know that my mother-in-law said she was a member of Church of God in Christ and still is. She said they used to call Martin Luther King a terrorist in the church. And so, you know, when we have that understanding of how we've been manipulated and not being allowed to embrace these people who had literally given their lives to free us, we know we kind of have to change how we think and how we teach our kids. So I really think the battle now is psychological. It's not as much physical anymore. It is truly helping our kids believe and understand that they are beautiful how they are, and our boys specifically loving who their mother is and who their grandmother and aunts are, and then seeking someone who resembles them. So I just wanted to put that in there.
All right. Thank you.
I also-
Go ahead.
I also wanted to jump in and really piggyback off of what you just said as well, Ms. Dory. I do agree. I honestly, I still consider myself to be a Christian, but I honestly feel like I was raised in a cult because of the, you know, like the end goal was to be perfect. And in doing all of that it creates a sense of religiosity. And that is totally not something that I innately, as a Black woman, you know, I don't think it's not realistic. Not saying that we're not perfect. I mean, because I do feel that we are beautiful. And I'm loving your daughter's hair. It's so beautiful. I wish I would, but see, Tony just sent me this information, so I didn't comb my hair yet. So I can't jump on here like that. You know how Black women feel about their hair.
Thank you, sister. Yes.
But I also wanted to give a shout out to Dr. Joy DeGruy. She wrote the book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And we are now in an age where they are so, they're trying to silence history, which absolutely doesn't even make sense. It makes no sense. We want to celebrate, but we can't celebrate our legacy and then also things the traumatic and the barbaric, since they always say that Black people are so aggressive, but that is not the truth. Actually, they are very barbaric. And I mean, who would do the things that they've done? So I'm trying as an MSW to stay focused, because I do want to get licensed. Tony and I have had many conversations, and I was like, I'm not going to read this book, because it's like, the more you know, it's hard to then have to sit down and take this European test. But at the end of the day, we need more Black licensed clinicians. And so I'm working, this is going to be my fourth time taking this test for hunting. I will be a licensed Black licensed clinician shortly, because I have a word to say.
Absolutely.
Keep it going.
One last plug. I want to make sure you guys also know about, I wrote a book. It's called Brown Skin with Three Ponytails. Brown Skin with Three Ponytails, a journey towards forgiving while never forgetting. And it really talks about that whole religiosity piece.
Right.
Because a lot of young Black children are put in a place because of trauma to take care of their children, because nobody wants to talk about, we just pray about depression. My mother was depressed my whole entire life. So I raised her 5 children, and now I'm tired. But anyway, I'm not going to monopolize your time. I just wanted to make sure you got...
It's good. It's good. You know what? And I have to say, it is something we deal with, double consciousness, but that allows us to, what do we call code switch? What did you say earlier, Tony, about code switching? It allows us to navigate those waters, right? To be able to still empower our people as long as we have that understanding, because we will have to function in their knowledge, right? But as long, like the scripture tells us, with all knowledge, gain understanding, even if it costs you everything. And when I first read that, I was like, Lord, that sounds so urgent, but it's because it is urgent. Because we got so big about knowledge, but we didn't gain that understanding to think about if we should do something, right? Or if we should speak on something. And so as long as we have the knowledge is good, but making sure we really function from that understanding when it comes to us empowering our own people is where it's really at. And so I applaud you. Yes, get that certificate. We need you in there. I got out of the institution, but I'm still connected to my sisters and brothers in the institution because we need to be everywhere. We need to be everywhere. So yeah, I'm done too, Tony, because you know I could go on and on and on.
One last thing, I'm in the process of writing a book, and one of the chapters that I wrote is our people fail because of access to knowledge.
That part.
So yes, I had to make sure nobody else wrote it. It's copyrighted already, but yes, access, because a lot of times you don't know. So that is the goal. So anyway, I'm gonna jump off to. All right, this is awesome. Thanks for inviting me, you guys.
All right, thank you, sisters. Thank you so much. Thank you for that information. All right, now we're gonna talk about, of course, my favorite part of the presentation. Prominent Blacks in sports and entertainment social work. All right, first and foremost, God bless this man right here, Dr. Emmett Gill. A few years ago, I attended a CEU training on sports social work, and this was the gentleman that introduced me to sports social work. For so many years, after getting my MSW, I just, I was in and out of the social work genre, career, etc., because I just didn't know what was really for me. And when I went to this, when I went to this gentleman's seminar, I was like, oh, this is the natural high I needed right here, because I didn't realize at the time that athletes, coaches, and even referees, can use social workers in their lives or whatever. But anyway, I just want to touch upon this for a second. He's the current executive director of Athletes and Advocates for Social Justice in Sports. And he's the former president of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sports. All right, Coach John Thompson. Coach John Thompson, my favorite basketball coach of all time. And yes, basketball-wise, I am a Hoya fan because of Coach Thompson. All right? But anyway, Coach Thompson was the second Division I men's coach to ever be hired. The first was William J. Robertson at Illinois State. But in 1972, Coach Thompson became the second ever head coach, second ever head Black coach at a Division I institution at Georgetown University. One thing I loved about Coach Thompson was that he stood up to the mainstream media, okay? They always unfairly labeled him, and I've even gotten that unfair label before of being an angry Black man, okay? They unfairly labeled him that, like, why are you always talking about race? Well, in your articles, you're always talking under racial tones, so undertones per se. So again, I love the fact that he was unapologetically Black, and he didn't take no crap off no one in the white mainstream media, none. Okay, so he stood up when it was unpopular to do so, when it was when there was much fewer Black coaches coaching Division I basketball. And also, Hoya paranoia. Hoya paranoia was pretty much when Patrick Ewing, Basketball Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing, was at Georgetown, they would often, the fans, if they're opposing teams they would play, when they would go on the road, the fans often, either would throw bananas on the basketball court, calling him a gorilla, saying his intellect, wasn't great per se, and drawing pictures of gorillas. And so I think behind the scene, Coach Thompson encouraged his players to be real short-winded with the media. And that's where Hoya paranoia was created. When they ask the players questions, I love every time I watch those videos, I love it. And they'll be like, hey, Patrick, you guys just won the such and such championship. How does it feel? And Patrick will be like, great. And he'll dap his teammates up and just turn his back to the media. You know, all his players were doing that. And Coach Thompson would take all the smoke and give the media all the smoke. Okay, man, I'm telling you, to have a coach like that really has your back, especially when people in the media just say some of the most foolish things. Man, that's a great thing to have. That is a great thing to have. Okay, so I appreciate Coach Thompson about that. And then he was an advocate of Proposition 48 and opposed to Proposition 42. Proposition 48 was that if you were a partial qualifier, you could still get a scholarship to Division I school. You couldn't play as a freshman, and then you basically had to prove that you could do the classwork. And then once your sophomore year began, then you were eligible to play sports, and then you would get that year back if you earned your diploma within 4 years. Proposition 42 was trying to do away with Proposition 48. Proposition 48, of course, it benefited more Black athletes than anyone else. Okay, because a lot of times, just like Sister was saying earlier, we just don't have access to a lot of the same information. So they always expect us to be able to score as high on their standardized tests, okay? The tests that are culturally biased to begin with, all right? But again, I appreciated Coach Thompson and Coach John Chaney. They're both ancestors now. I appreciate both of them being strong proponents of Prop 48, especially being a former student athlete myself who almost became a Prop 48 myself. But y'all should have heard how loud I shouted when I got the SAT scores and barely made that score. But again, I was almost a Prop 48, all right? But one thing that stood out in how he finished his career was that he took a chance on Allen Iverson. He took a chance on Allen Iverson after no other coach would recruit Allen Iverson. For those of you who may be familiar or may not be familiar with the Allen Iverson story, was that his junior year of high school, there was this big brawl at this bowling alley, and he was accused and convicted of being one of the culprits. Well, he had to serve time in prison until he was pardoned by the first Black U.S. governor, Douglas Wilder of Virginia, another HBCU grad from Virginia Union, but he pardoned Allen Iverson, and no coach would touch Allen Iverson after all he had done. But Coach Thompson, after much convincing from Allen Iverson's mother and other family members, Coach Thompson took a chance on him. He said in his autobiography that Allen was the hardest worker he ever had. See, we never hear that in the media. We always hear about Allen being a thug or whatever way they want to paint him out, or someone who didn't love the practice. But he said he didn't have one issue with Allen while he was in school because he appreciated his work ethic and the fact that Allen used a lot of that as motivation to help them to work even harder on being unfairly and unjustly incarcerated. So again, Coach Thompson definitely deserve his kudos for doing that. All right, my favorite coach of all time. I've only met this gentleman in person only once and have had conversations with him several times on the phone in the past, but that is Coach Freddie James, okay? That's my hero in sports. Coach Freddie James is the legendary head football coach. He's now retired, of course, but he's the legendary head football coach at Dallas Carter High School. So during the 1980s, there was like different controversies about Carter High School and some things going on, with their players. But the thing that made me have just a huge admiration about Coach James was that no matter what, he was all about getting his players into college, his student athletes into college. As a matter of fact, in 1988, he set a national record. He set a national record of getting, at that time, 18 of his seniors signed to college scholarships. Now that number went up, before he retired, like within a decade later. And so I had a conversation with him, and I was like, Coach, I said, man, it's just so wonderful that you was able to do all that. I said, even some of your backups, on the team got scholarships. I was like, man, that never happens. Like, how was you able to do that? And he was just like, he said, hey, I always kept college coaches at my practices. I always kept college coaches at my practices. So when they would show up to the practice and they would see how good the backups look against the starters, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, this guy can play, he can play college football as well. Okay, so it wasn't just, just the starters that he looked out for. And also, I talked to one of his former players who was also and one of his most outstanding players, in my opinion, is that of Gary Edwards. And I asked Gary, I asked him about how his recruiting process went. He said, TA, when I was on JV and when college coaches would come through, the NCAA has what you call a bump rule, where if a coach just happened to be walking through the school and he can say hi to a student athlete, who may be not in a certain grade to be able to have a conversation with a college coach per se, but Gary told me, he said that even when I was on JV, he said, if I happened to be passed through Coach James' offices and there was a college coach there, Coach James would stop me and say, Gary, come here. He said, hey, Coach such and such, this is Gary Edwards. You're going to hear about him in a couple of years, so put him on your list right now, okay? And Gary's like, man, I was just amazed because I was on JV at the time. And he was like, so by the time I was a senior, recruiting was easy for me because Coach James had put it out there for me. You have to understand, I say that with a lot of passion and energy because living in Central Texas, we had a lot of we didn't have any black head coaches, number one, when I was coming up, but we had a lot of coaches that would hold your mail from you, your recruiting mail from you, your college coaches, and this was back before YouTube and all that stuff and technology. So pretty much the coaches could hide your scholarship offers from you and any type of recruiting mail, and they would, in my opinion, they would hold that proverbial carrot over your nose that you better do as I say, or I'm going to stop you from being able to go to college. Because they knew for a lot of us, like myself, I grew up real poor. So they knew that, being able to get a college scholarship, an athletic scholarship, was going to be a form of social upward movement for me and many of my classmates who lived in similar circumstances. So again, that's why I've always had a lot of love and admiration for Coach James, because again, he was the man, okay? Still is the man, even in retirement. So again, thank you, Coach James. All right, some prominent black athletes who sacrificed their careers. Curt Flood. Curt Flood was the first athlete to challenge the status quo in free agency. Unfortunately, his career ended prematurely because he didn't want to get traded to a certain team that he knew that would not be beneficial to his career. So he challenged it and took them to court. He didn't win, of course, but later on, free agency ended up becoming a big thing. So we see now people like LeBron James, even though Curt Flood played baseball, but we see like in different sports, the importance of free agencies and how players can make their own decisions once their contract have expired per se. All right, so Muhammad Ali, we know due to his religious beliefs, he chose to not go to Vietnam, okay? Some, people, they call him a draft dodger, etc. But he held to his religious beliefs and still, even after being exiled from the sport of boxing, once he regained his license to become a boxer again, he was able to regain his heavyweight championship that was unjustly stripped from him. So again, another black athlete who sacrificed their career. Then we have Sister Maya Moore. Sister Maya Moore, fighting for social justice of someone who's wrongly incarcerated, chose to not play basketball in the WNBA in the peak of her career. She made that decision to not do so. And kudos to you, sister. Thank you so much for setting the precedence, okay? For standing on something that you believed in. But again, Sister Maya Moore. All right? Roberto Clemente. Roberto Clemente was from Puerto Rico. He was of the diaspora as well, of the African diaspora. But Roberto Clemente, Brother Clemente, paid the ultimate sacrifice, and because he was always looking out for those who were less fortunate or poor people per se. And unfortunately, after a tragic earthquake took place, I believe in Central America, he wanted to take some items down in relief effort. And he wanted to personally go down to make sure that the items were being given or rendered per se as he had planned. But unfortunately, Brother Clemente was killed in a plane crash on the way, you know, to such relief efforts or whatever. But we consider that of him paying the ultimate sacrifice. Okay, again, helping those who were less fortunate, and again, speaking up for social justices at all times. And then Sister Wyoming Tyus, the first human being to win the 100 meters in consecutive Olympics. She was a Tennessee State Tiger Belle, and she talked and advocated for the advancement of women in sports. Because again, when she came home from the second Olympics in 1968, she was talking about how there was no endorsements. You know, she was again saying, hey, if I was a man, I probably would have got, you know, more things. But back then for women, you know, they didn't have anything. And her fellow Tiger Belle who preceded her, Wilma Rudolph, and all the great things that she did, it was sad to hear stories of them being broke, you know, and scrambling for jobs and things of that nature after all they did for this country. Nowadays, of course, you know, the great thing is that a lot of these athletes that when they win gold medals, or at least, you know, represent their country in the Olympics, then a lot of times there's going to be some endorsements that follow. So again, I appreciate her for bringing that to light and for even, you know, standing up for the Olympic Project for Human Rights and wearing the black shorts during the Olympics. Okay, when she was running just to make a statement. We all hear about Brother Tommy Smith and Brother John Carlos putting up their black fists. However, Sister Tyus played a huge role in that as well. So again, kudos to those that made sacrifices. Now, as far as entertainment social work goes, Curtis Mayfield will always be my favorite, my very, very favorite artist of all time. Brother Curtis, he always made songs uplifting the Black community, telling us how beautiful we are, you know, as people. Brother Curtis, you know, made those songs like "We're a Winner." Oh, I still jam that. We're a winner, and don't let anybody say that you can't make it because the feeble mind is in your way. Okay, all right, Brother Curtis, he made those socially conscious songs all the time that kept us motivated. Okay, he even made gospel songs too that further kept us motivated as people. All right, so again, kudos to Brother Curtis and Sister Nina Simone. Who can forget about that sister? To be young, gifted, and Black. Come on now, you know, what song is on that level? To be young, gifted, and Black. All right, so I thank Sister Nina, and she made the song Mississippi. I won't repeat it, but you know, she was basically talking about her home state of Mississippi and the things that was going on there. All right, so again, I pay homage to those ancestors. All right, as far as it relates to entertainment social work. Sister Aretha, she made her socially conscious songs too, and she also made songs about you know things about liberation for women as well. Okay, so kudos, Sister Aretha. Brother Stevie, all right, always making those uplifting songs as well. And then Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Man, I don't know if I ever stop jamming that song. Okay, so again, those people, I pretty much always still enjoy listening to their music and appreciate them uplifting us. Now, I'm gonna transition over to hip hop because as it relates to entertainment social work, there was this brother who was so far ahead of his time, and that's Brother Scott LaRock. Man, you should have seen me back in the 1980s, standing in front of that mirror in the b-boy stands trying to look like Scott LaRock, you know, back in the day, you know, and my preacher stepfather who just couldn't understand what was, you know, what was going on with these brothers and felt that it was a waste of time me listening to music. But Brother Scott was a former student athlete himself, okay? And Brother Scott used his education to get a job as a social worker at a men's shelter where he then met KRS-One, who became his rapping cohort of the group Boogie Down Productions, all right? Now, Scott had a brilliant business mindset, very intelligent brother. Like I said, he was only in his early 20s still, way before his time, like I said. He had a brilliant business mindset. And he used his DJ skills to further influence hip hop. DJ Scott LaRock was what he was affectionately called. But Scott had a way of galvanizing people, man. He could bring people together, okay? But and on like a non-violent type of thing where it was all about, hey man, let's go out and have fun. We know what the struggle is out there. We know how it is out there in these streets. Let's come together and have fun, man, enjoy some good music, et cetera, et cetera. Scott had that appeal. Scott didn't have any enemies. Scott, unfortunately, being a good social worker that he is, or that he was per se, was going to help squash a beef, a senseless street beef. and unfortunately became a casualty because he got caught in the crossfire of a street beef and lost his life. Man, that hurts the more I think about that, because based on what I've researched, in a couple of weeks after that, had Scott lived, he would have been a millionaire. Okay, I mean that's the type of influence Scott had, and he had the presence of mind to start his own record label. Okay, Scott was one of the first to ever do that. So again, sports and entertainment social work is always, very important. All right. So as it relates to starting his own record label, we have Uncle Luke, who I think Uncle Luke might have been the very, very first person to, okay, in the hip hop industry. Russell Simmons, P. Diddy, and I live in Texas, so of course I got to give props to Jay Prince. All right. So these brothers, they refused to be victims of the music industry and started their own record labels. They peeped game early on, all right, and they refused to have someone else earning the money that they provided sweat equity for, per se.
I hate to interrupt, Brother Tony. I just want to tell you we got 15 minutes left. And I know your presentation, so just wanted to let you know, but you are doing an outstanding job. You have lifted my spirits today. Just want to give you that reminder.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. We will trust. We gonna be finished though on time. Okay. Thank you though. All right. But Master P, who I want to point out, because Master P, in his mission to become a mogul, he created many jobs for other people. He helped make other people millionaires. Okay. He helped make other people millionaires. So I love that about P. And then P saw fit, like, okay, well, it's got to be other opportunities for to be made elsewhere. So what P did, he was one of the first to combine sports and entertainment as business per se. So he got involved in sports, became a sports agent, putting on sports events, et cetera, et cetera. And I think all his children are millionaires, not by his money, but because of business decisions that that they've made, that he's taught them about. All right. And then of course, Coach Prime down at Jackson State. Gotta give him his props, because albeit I always root against Jackson State when they play PV, but I gotta give Coach Prime his props because he's brought so much more resources to the HBCU sports culture with his influence alone. So again, that's sports and entertainment. Now, of course, what has been the pillar in the Black community this whole time? All right. Even since the slavery days. All right, the Black church, okay? The Black church. All right, the Black church pretty much has been a mainstay. It's pretty much, we have the preachers, the deacons, the women and mothers in the church who took care of us, growing up. All right. And yes, I was told a few times growing up that I was going to hell if I didn't straighten up. All right, the people that was trying to scare you into heaven, I should say, or whatever. But again, like I said, I always appreciated that growing up. Of course, we know about the Black church. Hey, it's one available in every Black community. We know that. All right. And then it has provided assistance to countless Black families. All right, to countless families, but especially Black families. All right. So again, the Black church, where gospel music got its roots. Okay, for those of us that love Amazing Grace and songs like that, or never would have made it, by what's the brother name, Marvin Sapp? Okay, songs like that. Hey, those songs like that help us keep going as well, in addition to prayer and meditation. All right. So with all that being said, hey, I want to give much thanks to the National Association of Black Social Workers, for that, for this opportunity to be able to present to you all today. And thank you so much. But if there are any other questions or comments, please feel free in these last 10 minutes that we have, or I say 9 minutes, the last 9 minutes we have, feel free to give any closing discussions or comments, etc.
Thank you, Tony. Everything was very insightful. I learned a lot of new facts today, and I would love for you to pass along this PowerPoint.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sister.
Please.
Thank you.
DA, great job as usual. Learned a lot. Appreciate all the information you shared. The one name that I would say add to your list of for sports is Mahmoud Rauf that played at LSU.
Yes, yeah.
Because it cost him his career in the NBA when he decided to stand up for his religious beliefs. They won't say it like that, but it ended up costing him his career.
Right. Mhm. Yes, sir. And Mr. Darren Turner is actually my brother-in-law. So, and he's a social worker, has a social work degree as well. And I appreciate him coming on. He's a former student athlete as well and spent a little time in the NFL. Okay, played ball up at TCU while in college. All right. So definitely glad to have him on here. And brother Darren, I will say, just like Sister Cooper just told me, we only had so much time because trust me, there was so many other names I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about Brother Fred Hampton, how he was taken at such a young age. Oh man, that brother was so brilliant. He had a brilliant mind, you know, and could get, like Scott LaRock, he could galvanize people as well, you know. But again, you know, like I said, unfortunately, man, you know, they know how to take our leaders out, man. Unfortunately, they know how to take our powerful leaders out.
Yeah, and I agree with Sister Miss Doree, is that we've got to diffuse this whole idea that we have a leader, that we have leaders. I mean, as long as you can always pinpoint and take out one person and feel like you can stop a movement, that will always happen. So we got to diffuse this idea that there's only one way to lead and that there's only one person leading. That we've got to be multiple leaders in multiple venues and areas, so that we impact our community, so that when one head falls, the next one rises up.
I would say that we are the leaders.
I also wanted to give a shout out to Dawn Stanley. She's the head coach of South Carolina University.
Yes.
She is phenomenal. My daughter now plays for Texas Southern. But what she did was, when she won the state championship, she sent a piece of the net from winning the national championship to all of the Black coaches in their face, which I thought that was absolutely phenomenal, just to encourage them, because we also know that the majority of Black athletes are Black, especially in basketball, and that are the money-making sports. And so for her to do that is just, you know, stepping outside of the norm and making sure that other sisters know that not to give up, that the fight is here and we are standing. So, and I too was that was my way in, by playing college basketball. So I'm very proud of her. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, sister. Thank you all so much for the positive feedback. Like I said, you know, we only have 90 minutes. So yes, I had to cut some things out at the last minute, you know, that I had, you know, before the PowerPoint was even made, the PowerPoint in general. But again, yes, this it's a blessing to be able to speak on things like this, because again, like I said, ever since I saw that documentary in 3rd grade, that civil rights documentary, I've just had a natural high to want to learn more and more about our community and the struggles within it.
You know, Tony, we probably will just do a continuation of this, so we can just add part 2 of this discussion, because as we know, Black history is 365 days a year, a 360-degree view. So it doesn't end on the 28th. We are continuing it by the efforts that you are putting in today. This is probably one of the most in-depth Black history and, honest to God, presentations I've seen in a long, long time. You know, so I'm like super proud of you. You kind of gave me some knowledge to put in my little Black history notebook to take with me. This was so engaging and outstanding. And I would just like to piggyback off Brother Turner that said, we are the leaders. We don't have to have a leader. We are a leader by what we do in our community, state, national, and global. It starts with us. We are the leader. We need to quit looking, because we were given that mentality and mindset to look to others. We are the leaders in the steps that we make, especially as social workers, advocates, brokers, mentors. We are the leaders. So kudos to you. What a presentation. You did your thug thizzle, as they say, today. So I'm so proud of you. We just want to introduce some members right quick. I'm Trina Cooper, former membership and engagement, but continuing executive member. We have our president, Dr. Sharice Chevelle, and we have Marie, who is our public relations media, and our secretary, who we're missing today, Jamie McKinney. And we have Tony as our member. And probably if I missed anybody else, please forgive me.
Miss Dory, Sister Dory is our
Sister Dory. I apologize, Sister Dory. We'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming. If I missed anyone, please charge it to my head, as they say in church, to my head and not my heart.
Jamie is
Um,
here. Jamie.
Jamie, okay, hey Jamie, didn't see you. Hey Jamie, I didn't see you. And so we just wanted to open that door to introduce, but then also we're going to put up in the chat if someone will have you want to find interest in becoming a part of our group. You don't have to be a social worker, but if you're from the Black, what am I trying to say? How do I say it, Sharice? Black African ancestry. You can become a member. It's the majority of us are social workers, but you don't have to be a social worker to become a member for the Central Texas organization. We are a young
You don't have to live in
organization.
Central Texas either.
You have to live in Central Texas. And we
You don't
kind of
have to live in
expand it a little bit, depending on where you live, I think. You don't have to be a member. We meet once a month, and we will get that notification out to more people. We meet, what month? Is this the third week? Last month the last Saturday of the month. We used to meet on the first. We've had, so but Tony, you did such a wonderful job. If somebody could put our email up, if you want to inquire, we will send out information for you on the fees, what we're about, what our plans and goals are. And then I'm gonna pass it to our president, Dr. Chevelle.
Yeah, I was trying to find the document really quickly, but if you are interested in getting more information, I think at this point, since I can't seem to locate the document, if you will go ahead and put your name and your email address in the chat, and we will make sure that you get the information that we usually give during.
She put it in there now. She got sick breath. She's sick.
So if you don't mind doing that, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tony, for such a wonderful presentation. I have to definitely say that again. I'm standing, giving you a standing ovation. You just can't see it, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. Wonderful presentation. And, Trania is correct. We do not have to end the discussion. We can continue this discussion. Next month, in a couple of days, we're starting the, social work month. So we can continue this conversation of highlighting those key social workers in our Black community. We can coordinate with Marie, and we can figure out how we can get a discussion going on our social media sites, and just continue to keep that conversation going about those in our community that we need to be emphasizing and we need to be highlighting. And if any of you have any information that you would like to post on our social media sites about anybody that we need to be, highlighting or emphasizing, please let us know. You can send us a message, or you can contact Marie Hines directly, and she will work on getting something on our social media site so that we can highlight those in our community that we need to highlight, so that we can continue again this conversation about those in our community that has done some fantastic things and continue to remind us about being leaders, but also helping us to be leaders in our current life. And then also, I do want to say this idea of leadership, the idea of not having or not thinking about being, having one leader. I do agree that we need to be shifting our thought process in regard to only thinking there's only one leader. We are leaders in and of ourselves, and we have to develop our leadership capacity. But not only that, we also have to be teaching and training those that are coming after us to be leaders. So as we're growing our children, as we are nurturing them, as we're developing them as a young age, and Tony mentioned this in his presentation throughout, how those who have done some fantastic things, they are turning back and they're passing it down to their children, so their children can then be awesome as well. So we have to, in regards to being a leader, we also have to teach our children to be leaders right at the age that they are. As they're growing up, we're teaching them about being leaders, because we do have to lead ourselves before we can lead anybody else. We have to lead ourselves. And so we have to definitely think in that regard. So anyway, I have nothing else to say. Jamie, do you have anything that you would like to say? I will send information out. If you put your name and email address in the chat, we will send information out to you. Jamie, is there anything that you would like to say before we conclude our session today?
No, I don't have anything.
No?
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We certainly thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will come back and join us again next month. Tony, again, wonderful job. Thank you so much. And we will have a replay on our social media sites of this presentation if you would like to, return back and just pick up some more of those golden nuggets that Tony threw out at us today, to be able to share with others. So that's it. Thank you all for coming, and our meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.